They called him the man who would fix Britain, but today millions are calling him something else: useless. Keir Starmer, once praised for bringing calm and control to British politics, is now facing the biggest crisis of his career. New data shows he has become the most unpopular Prime Minister since records began, even lower than Liz Truss during her economic meltdown. And the reason behind this political disaster: a failed government project that was supposed to bring Britain into the future, the digital ID system. What began as a promise of progress has now turned into a symbol of government failure. Tonight we look at how one technological dream turned into a national. The digital ID system was meant to be one of the biggest changes in modern Britain, a single, secure online identity for every citizen. The idea sounded simple. People could log in once and access everything from NHS records to driving licenses and tax services. No more endless passwords, no more piles of paperwork. It was supposed to be quick, safe and smart. A new step toward a digital Britain. The plan was announced with great excitement. Ministers called it a new era of convenience. Starmer himself said it would bring trust and efficiency to the public sector. Billions were invested, private tech firms were hired. Advertisements promised that soon every Briton could use their smart ID for all government needs. For months, the government sold the dream of a digital revolution. But the dream started to break the moment the system went live. On launch day, millions tried to register and the servers crashed within hours. People who managed to sign up found errors in their profiles, wrong names, wrong birth dates, missing records. Some users discovered other people's medical or financial data under their own ID, a shocking sign of a serious data breach. Soon after, the media began reporting stories of chaos. Pensioners couldn't access their payments because their identity couldn't be verified. Students couldn't apply for university grants. Businesses waiting for government approvals saw their applications vanish in the system. The website meant to unite Britain's digital services had instead locked millions of people out of them. The opposition was quick to react. Conservative MPs mocked the government's smart ID by calling it stupid ID. Social media filled with memes and angry hashtags like hashtag digital disaster and hashtag useless PM. The phrase Starmer's tech collapse began trending within 24 hours. Behind the scenes, reports revealed that the system was rushed. Engineers had warned ministers months earlier about security and server flaws. Internal documents leaked later showed that the project missed several testing stages to meet political deadlines. But the warnings were ignored, and now the cost was visible for everyone to see, not just in wasted money, but in lost trust. For a Prime Minister who built his image on being serious, reliable and in control, this failure hit directly at the heart of his reputation. The public saw not a man of solutions, but another leader making excuses. And for many Britons, that was the breaking point. Public anger grew fast. In town halls, on talk shows and across social media, people asked the same question. If the government can't even manage a website, how can it manage the country? Within days, approval ratings for Starmer's leadership began to fall. And not just slightly. Poll after poll showed a free fall in public support. Commentators described it as a crisis of competence. One headline in the Daily Mail read, "Digital ID failure exposes the useless PM." As trust collapsed, even members of Starmer's own party began to worry. Behind closed doors, Labour MPs whispered about the need for new leadership, or at least a cabinet reshuffle. But Starmer stood firm, saying the system's teething problems would be fixed. Yet to most Britons, that phrase, "and teething problems," it sounded like denial, and that denial came with a cost. The British people, already struggling with rising bills and slow economic recovery, now saw their government failing them in yet another way. Instead of moving forward with technology, they were left behind by it. The digital ID project had started as a promise of modernisation, but ended as a reminder that no matter how shiny the idea, leadership matters more than technology. And the failure of this one project would soon become the story that defined Starmer's entire premiership. The numbers tell the story better than any speech. Within 1 week of the digital ID disaster, Keir Starmer's approval ratings dropped to the lowest level ever recorded for a British Prime Minister. According to the latest public opinion surveys, only 18% of voters said they trusted him to run the country. The lowest figure since polling began. Even Liz Truss, who lasted just 44 days in office, had higher numbers when she left Downing Street. Political analysts described the fall as historic. Newspapers ran brutal headlines, from hope to humiliation, the digital disaster that broke Starmer, and one that simply read useless. The word began to stick. Commentators repeated it on live television. Opposition leaders echoed it in Parliament, and memes spread it across every social platform. In just a few days, useless became the public nickname for a man once seen as Labour's saviour. Inside the Labour Party, the mood turned dark. Party members who once spoke proudly of Starmer's calm leadership began to question whether he still had control. Some MPs quietly admitted to journalists that morale was at rock bottom. Whispers of an early leadership challenge began to circulate. A few even suggested that the digital ID scandal could become for Starmer what the Brexit chaos was for Theresa May, the beginning of the end. But what made this collapse different was its emotional tone. It wasn't just about bad numbers or failed policy, then it was about broken trust. The British people had been promised competence after years of political drama. Starmer's entire brand was built on being the adult in the room, the leader who would fix things after years of chaos. And yet this single failure painted him as just another politician making excuses. Public frustration wasn't limited to politics. Business leaders warned that the digital ID breakdown had cost millions in lost transactions. Banks and universities complained about delays. Even hospitals reported issues verifying staff and patient identities. For ordinary citizens, every story of government malfunction became another reason to lose faith. In Parliament, the opposition seized the moment. Conservative leader Richard Holden mocked Starmer by saying the Prime Minister can't even log into his own promises. The line went viral overnight. During question time, Starmer looked visibly tense as MPs laughed and shouted, "Useless!" It was a rare moment when the usually composed leader seemed completely cornered. To calm the storm, the government organised an emergency press conference. Starmer appeared beside the Home Secretary, attempting to take responsibility while defending the project. His words, however, did little to rebuild confidence. This was a complex launch, he said, and while we expected challenges, the scale of issues was greater than planned. The statement sounded technical, distant and robotic. It lacked the emotional tone people were waiting to hear. An apology. Within hours, the press branded the speech as tone deaf. The BBC reported that the Prime Minister's approval among Labour voters had dropped by 22 points in a single week. The Guardian's front page headline summed it up: the trust crisis. Even within his cabinet, the pressure began to build. Sources from Downing Street leaked reports of ministers arguing over who was to blame: the tech contractors, the civil service, or the Prime Minister himself. Some suggested firing the digital transformation minister as a sacrifice to ease the public anger, but insiders said Starmer refused, insisting that no one would be thrown under the bus. That statement, meant to sound noble, instead looked like weakness to critics. Outside, protests began forming. Citizens gathered outside Parliament carrying banners that read "Stop Digital IDs" and "No to Useless PM." The anger wasn't only about the failed rollout anymore. It had grown into a broader rejection of Starmer's leadership style, too bureaucratic, too cautious, too disconnected from real people. The fall in approval wasn't just political, it was psychological. People who had voted Labour with hope now felt embarrassed. They didn't see a visionary leader, they saw a lawyer defending a bad case. For the first time, even Starmer's strongest supporters started saying maybe he's not the one. Behind closed doors, advisors pushed for damage control. Some recommended a full system shutdown and relaunch under a new name. Others advised a national apology tour, urging Starmer to face voters directly. But sources claim he rejected both, choosing instead to wait for the storm to pass. The storm, however, wasn't slowing. Each day brought new headlines, new technical failures, and new memes. The government's official website was still experiencing outages, and citizens continued to report data mix-ups. Trust was evaporating faster than the government could issue statements. By the end of the month, political analysts were unanimous. Starmer's digital ID project had done more damage to his credibility than any scandal in recent British history. It wasn't corruption, it wasn't a personal mistake, it was something deeper, a symbol that the man who promised competence had delivered chaos. For many voters, this was the turning point. They no longer cared about the technical reasons or the internal reports. What they saw was simple: a prime minister who couldn't deliver. And in modern politics, once that image takes hold, recovery is almost impossible. The public response was immediate, loud, and unforgiving. Within hours of the digital ID failure, the internet turned into a battlefield of frustration. Social media timelines flooded with screenshots of error messages, broken login screens, and angry posts from people who couldn't access their most basic services. Hashtags like hashtag digital disaster, hashtag Starmer fail, and hashtag useless PM began trending across the UK, gathering millions of views within days. For many citizens, the anger wasn't only about a failed app, it was about what the failure represented. After years of promises about a smarter government, this project had become a painful reminder that technology means nothing without accountability. People felt cheated. They had been told the digital ID would make their lives easier. Instead, it locked them out of hospitals, universities, and job portals. News channels picked up the outrage quickly. Sky News called it a humiliation for a government that promised competence. BBC correspondents described the rollout as a rare example of complete digital chaos. The Daily Telegraph front page shouted, "From smart ID to national embarrassment." Across political lines, even left-leaning outlets struggled to defend the government. One Guardian columnist wrote, "Labour's problem isn't technology, it's arrogance." Meanwhile, the stories from ordinary citizens added emotional weight to the crisis. A pensioner from Manchester went viral after saying, "I can't access my pension because the system says I don't exist. I've worked 40 years and now my government says I'm invisible." Another clip showed a single mother in tears after being unable to claim her child benefit because of repeated ID errors. These moments spread across TikTok, X and YouTube, turning technical failure into human tragedy. Radio stations and talk shows were filled with angry voices. Callers compared the government system to a bad student project and a nightmare built with taxpayers' money. Some demanded resignations, others demanded refunds, but almost everyone agreed on one point: the Prime Minister had lost touch with reality. Memes also became a powerful weapon. One popular image showed Starmer standing beside a crashed computer screen with the caption, "Error 404, leadership not found." Another meme used the Labour logo replaced by a loading bar stuck at 99%, symbolising promises that never finished loading. While the jokes were light-hearted, the sentiment behind them was not. Inside newsrooms, journalists spoke of an unprecedented collapse in confidence. Political analysts noted that even during the worst Brexit debates or the pandemic response, no Prime Minister had seen such a sharp, universal loss of public trust so quickly. Polling experts described it as the first political collapse caused entirely by technology. And the digital anger wasn't staying online, it was spilling into the streets. In London, Birmingham and Manchester, small protests started forming under the banner "Stop Digital Control." Many of the protesters weren't just against the failed system, they were against the very idea of government IDs. For them, the digital ID mess became proof that the government couldn't be trusted with personal data. Placards read, "Don't scan me, fix me, and we are not experiments." For the media, this was a storm too big to ignore. Every newspaper, every late night show, every digital outlet was talking about the digital ID meltdown. Even international media joined in. CNN called it Britain's great tech breakdown. And the New York Times ran a headline reading, "Starmer's digital dream turns to political dust." By the second week, the tone had shifted from shock to ridicule. Reporters outside Downing Street asked ministers if they could log in successfully today. Opposition MPs began mocking government announcements with fake error messages on social media. One MP tweeted, "This government has the same problem as its digital ID. It doesn't recognise its own citizens." And through it all, Keir Starmer's silence made things worse. For almost 10 days, he avoided unscripted interviews. When he finally appeared in front of cameras, he looked calm but distant. His message was technical, not emotional. He talked about data audits, security patches, and system reliability, but never once said, "I'm sorry." That single missing word became the symbol of everything wrong with his leadership. The media highlighted it repeatedly. Psychologists interviewed on morning shows explained that when leaders fail to apologise, people stop feeling empathy. They start feeling anger. And that's exactly what happened. Public anger turned into distrust, and distrust turned into resentment. Pollsters recorded the fastest drop in voter confidence ever seen in Britain. In focus groups, words like cold, robotic and unreachable replaced professional and competent. The Prime Minister who promised to restore order was now being seen as the man who broke the system. By the end of the month, late-night shows openly joked about the useless PM. One comedian said, "Britain's new national sport is trying to log into government services." The audience laughed, but behind the laughter was a deep sense of disappointment. For millions, the digital ID collapse wasn't just a story about a computer glitch. It was about a government that failed to listen. It was about leadership without connection. And the media, once cautiously supportive of Starmer, now portrayed him as a man trapped by his own promise of perfection. As the outrage reached its peak, Downing Street moved into full damage control. Emergency meetings were held late into the night. Ministers arrived at number 10 with tired faces and stacks of reports searching for a plan to stop the political bleeding. The government had two choices: admit total failure or try to rebuild trust piece by piece. First came the public relations operation. The Prime Minister's office announced a national review of the digital identity programme. A new task force of cybersecurity experts, data officers and independent auditors was formed. Their job was to investigate every flaw, from system design to management oversight. The announcement was meant to sound strong, a government taking charge, but to most citizens it sounded like another committee, another excuse, another delay. The Home Secretary promised that the digital ID system would be fully restored within weeks. But experts quickly dismissed the claim, saying that the system's foundation was too weak to fix that fast. Leaked documents showed that the software itself was unstable, rushed to meet political deadlines before testing was complete. Engineers described it as a house built on sand. Then came the apology, or something close to it. In a televised address, Keir Starmer finally spoke directly to the public. His tone was calm, measured and serious. He said, "I understand the frustration. We will fix this system and we will restore your trust." It was an attempt at leadership, but the emotion wasn't there. The words sounded carefully chosen, not heartfelt. For a nation that wanted accountability, it felt too little, too late. Meanwhile, pressure inside the Labour Party kept growing. Senior ministers began distancing themselves from the project, calling it a shared responsibility rather than a prime ministerial decision. Reports surfaced of secret meetings among backbench MPs discussing possible successors. Political insiders compared the mood to the final weeks of previous failed premierships: quiet, nervous and uncertain. Outside Westminster, the public mood remained sour. Thousands of citizens demanded refunds for lost payments and identity corrections. Tech experts warned that repairing the digital ID database could take months, maybe even years. The damage wasn't just technical, it was psychological. Millions now feared using government technology again. Worried about privacy leaks and access failures, The business sector also started losing patience. Companies that relied on government verification systems, banks, insurance firms, and recruitment agencies reported delays costing millions. Many began using private verification services instead, weakening trust in public systems even further. Analysts said the fiasco had set Britain's digital transformation back by at least 5 years. Label useless wasn't just trending anymore, it had become a national verdict. Internationally, the story became an embarrassment. The European press called it the Great British Tech Blunder. American newspapers described it as a warning to governments that overpromise and underdeliver. Even leaders from allied countries quietly questioned whether Britain could still be trusted as a digital innovation partner. Through all of this, Starmer's personal image suffered the most. Political commentators said he looked isolated, drained, and defensive. Once known for his discipline and calm approach, he now appeared uncertain. Pollsters warned that Labour's lead in national polls, once considered unshakable, was rapidly shrinking. Some insiders pushed for a bold reset, suggesting Starmer scrap the entire digital ID programme and replace it with something new under a different name. Others advised a complete leadership rebranding, more public visits, emotional interviews, and direct connections with ordinary citizens. But Starmer seemed unwilling to change his style. He stuck to technical speeches and closed-door meetings, believing the public would eventually forget. But in modern politics, nothing is forgotten. Every meme, every headline, every viral clip of frustrated citizens remains alive online, reshared daily as a reminder of failure. The useless label refused to fade. For every small government success that followed, people responded with one word: too late. In Parliament, opposition parties prepared for the next general election with new slogans attacking Starmer's credibility. Conservatives framed their campaign around competence, calling themselves the real party of order. Smaller parties like Reform UK used the digital ID collapse to gain attention, saying it proved that both major parties were broken. Political experts now describe this moment as the point where public confidence in Starmer may never recover, not because of one technical failure, but because of what it represented: a loss of belief that his government could deliver on its promises. By the end of the year, the digital ID system was still offline. Investigations were still ongoing, and Keir Starmer, once seen as the calm hand guiding Britain's future, had become the face of its most embarrassing technological failure. Some analysts say he can still recover if he rebuilds trust, reforms his cabinet, and delivers visible progress. Others believe the damage is already done, that the phrase useless PM will follow him to the next election. In the end, one truth remains clear: leadership isn't just about policy or numbers, it's about trust. And in the digital age, trust can vanish faster than any server crash. As Britain waits for answers, one question echoes through every headline, every protest, and every living room. If the Prime Minister can't protect our data or our confidence, what can he protect at all? In politics, few things destroy power faster than broken trust. What began as a technical mistake has now turned into a test of leadership, communication, and credibility. Keir Starmer's digital ID failure didn't just expose problems in technology, it exposed problems in governance. It showed how a government that promised competence can fall apart when it forgets the people behind the policies. Across Britain, the public mood has shifted from anger to disappointment. Many citizens no longer expect quick fixes or apologies. They simply want a government that works. The digital collapse was more than a malfunction. It became, it became a mirror reflecting years of promises that never met reality. Inside the Labour Party, the silence is heavy. Some still defend the Prime Minister, arguing that every major reform faces setbacks. But others whisper that it's already too late. Once the public decides a leader is useless, the label rarely fades. History remembers those words long after the systems are repaired. Political experts say the coming months will define not only Starmer's legacy, but the future of Labour itself. If the government can rebuild the digital ID system and restore trust, Starmer might still recover. But if he fails again, even once, this could mark the beginning of another lost decade in British politics. For ordinary Britons, the lesson is simpler. Progress without accountability means nothing. Technology without empathy becomes cold. And leadership without trust is no leadership at all. As screens flicker with new headlines and voters scroll through their feeds, one question lingers. Did Keir Starmer lose control of a system? Or did the system finally expose that he was never in control to begin with?